Imagine standing on a muddy battlefield in England in the year 865 AD. You're a trained soldier. You have your sword, your shield, and your armor. You're ready to fight. But then the fog lifts, and you see them dash. Running towards you are men with no armor. No chainmail, no helmets. Some are completely naked. They are not screaming like men. They are howling like wolves. They are foaming at the mouth. You watch in horror as one of them stops, grabs the heavy wooden edge of his own shield, and bites into it so hard that his teeth splinter the wood. You strike one with your sword, slashing his chest. But he doesn't fall. He doesn't even flinch. He just looks at you with dilated, black eyes and laughs. We know them as berserkers, the legendary Viking warriors who felt no pain and knew no fear. For centuries, historians told us these men were possessed by the spirit of Odin. They said it was a religious trance. But modern science suggests a different, much darker truth. They weren't possessed by gods. They were high on a terrifying biological weapon. In this video, we're going to expose the chemical secret behind the Viking rage. We will look at the poisonous plant that turned ordinary farmers into unstoppable killing machines and the terrible price they paid for that power. First, let's look at the symptoms. Because going berserk wasn't just about being angry. It was a physical illness. The Vikings called it berserker gang dash. And it didn't start with screaming. It started with shivering. Minutes before a battle, while other soldiers were praying, the berserkers would begin to shake uncontrollably. Their teeth would chatter. They would feel a sudden, intense chill, followed immediately by a burning fever. Their faces would swell up and turn a deep, dark red, sometimes even purple. And then the mind snapped. They lost all human reason. They would howl like wild animals. They would gnaw on their iron shields. And once the battle started, they couldn't stop. They were known to keep fighting even after losing an arm or being pierced by multiple spears. They literally could not feel the damage being done to their bodies. For a long time, the world believed this was caused by magic mushrooms. Specifically, the famous red and white Amanita muscaria dash. You've seen pictures of Vikings eating mushrooms before battle in movies. But there's a big problem with that theory. Have you ever eaten a bad mushroom? It doesn't make you want to fight a war. It makes you want to vomit and go to sleep. Amanita muscaria is a sedative. If an army ate these mushrooms, they wouldn't be charging in a battle. They would be lying on the grass, giggling and unable to hold their swords. So if it wasn't mushrooms, what was it? Archaeologists recently opened a Viking grave at the fortress of Firket in Denmark. Inside, they found a pouch belonging to a vulva, a Viking sorceress. And inside that pouch were hundreds of seeds from a plant called Hallucinations niger dash. We know it better as Henbane, or stinking nightshade. This isn't a fun party drug. It is a highly toxic poison. In ancient times, it was used as an anesthetic for surgery because it completely blocks pain receptors. But if you take the wrong dose, it doesn't just put you to sleep. It unlocks the cage of the human mind. When crushed and rubbed onto the skin as an ointment or brewed into a tea, Henbane causes a very specific type of delirium. First, it creates a sensation of flight. This explains why Norse mythology is full of stories about Valkyries flying over battlefields and warriors transforming into birds. They weren't speaking metaphorically, they were tripping. Second, it causes aggressive, uncontrollable rage. Unlike mushrooms, which make you passive, Henbane triggers the fight or flight response but jams the switch on fight. But the scariest part is what it does to your vision. Under the influence of Henbane, objects appear to change shape and size. A normal English soldier wouldn't look like a human anymore. To a drug berserker, that soldier might look like a twisted demon or a monster. This explains why they attacked indiscriminately. The drug stripped away their ability to recognize friend from foe. In the sagas, there are terrifying accounts of berserkers suddenly turning around and hacking their own brothers to pieces because, in their hallucination, their brother had turned into a beast. And remember the face swelling? The red skin? Those are classic symptoms of anticholinergic poisoning, exactly what Henbane causes. It raises your body temperature and dilates your blood vessels, turning you red and making you feel like you were burning up from the inside. Hence the shield biting. They weren't just angry. They were physically overwhelmed by the heat and energy coursing through their veins. They were effectively turning themselves into biological tanks. No pain, no fear. Superhuman strength born from hysteria. But nature always demands a payment. And for the berserkers, the price of this power was horrific. Because once the battle was over, the drug didn't just wear off. It crashed. They called it the post-battle weakness, but that implies they were just tired. The reality was much uglier. The Norse sagas explicitly describe that after the rage subsided, a berserker became feeble. They didn't just take a nap. They collapsed into a state of total physical impotence. For 1 to 3 days after a battle, these terrified monsters would lie in their tents, vomiting, shivering, and unable to lift a finger. Their bodies had been pushed so far beyond their natural limits that they effectively shut down. Imagine the scene. The same man who, hours ago, was ripping throats out with his teeth is now curled up in a fetal position, crying and shaking, unable to feed himself. And the long-term price was even higher. You cannot repeatedly dose your brain with a neurotoxic poison and expect to stay sane. Over time, the Henbane permanently rewired their brains. Older berserkers were often described as mentally unstable, paranoid, and quick to violence even when there was no war. They suffered from permanent tremors and blindness. This leads us to a sad realization about their place in society. We like to picture Vikings as a brotherhood, drinking mead together in the Great Hall. But the berserkers? They weren't the heroes of the party. They were the outcasts. Regular Vikings were actually terrified of them. They were viewed less like elite soldiers and more like dangerous attack dogs. You unleash them when you need to kill an enemy, but you don't want them sleeping near your family. In fact, in 1015 AD, the Jarl Eirik of Norway actually outlawed berserkers completely. He declared them a danger to the public and banished them. Think about that. The Vikings, a culture that worshipped war, decided that these guys were too violent even for them. But there is one final, chilling theory about why they took these drugs. It wasn't just to kill the enemy. It was to silence their own humanity. Killing another human being is not natural. Even for a Viking, looking into the eyes of a man and ending his life takes a heavy psychological toll. The hesitation, the fear of death, the empathy, these are human traits that keep us alive. But on a battlefield, humanity is a weakness. The Henbane tea was the solution to that problem. It was a chemical wall. It didn't just block physical pain, it blocked the conscience. It turned off the part of the brain that feels fear or regret. It allowed a farmer to chop down a stranger without hesitating, because in his drug-fueled mind, he wasn't killing a person, he was fighting a monster in a dream. So, the next time you see a berserker in a movie or a video game, screaming and swinging an axe, don't just see a cool fantasy warrior. Remember the reality. Remember that behind that rage was a broken man. A man who had to poison his own body and destroy his own mind just to become the weapon his king needed him to be. He wasn't a superhero chosen by the gods. He was a tragedy. I'm certainly glad my morning tea is just Earl Grey and not stinking nightshade. Thanks for watching. If this video gave you a new perspective on Viking Rage, hit that like button and subscribe for more dark history revealed. Let me know in the comments. If you had a potion that would make you fearless but cost you your sanity, would you drink it? See you in the next video.